that's why you're here, man. You make me look good.
I do what I can.
My hair looks amazing when I
does.
sit next to you. So my forehead's still shiny.
Back to ninja weapons, because I'm not self-conscious about it at all.
Yeah. So we'll start with Leonardo.
Mm-hmm.
His two swords, the straight-bladed katana, is called
A ninja toe.
Ninja toe. Thank you. And that, again, going back to the whole finding styles, fingerprint kind of thing, if you learn about the weapon and what it was used for, you can kind of get a sense of it. Historically, that weapon doesn't really exist until like 1956 or 58. I have a note somewhere. Yeah, 56. And so, 1956, there's a photo of that weapon. I think 58 is when there's a replica in a museum in Japan. But for the most part, there's not any actual historical evidence beyond that. We're talking about ninjutsu came around in like the 15th century, but that sword isn't there in the 15th century. And when you really think about the nature of ninjutsu and what they're trying to do and trying to be all kind of sneaky and spies and assassins, and they gotta hide themselves in whatever equipment they're using, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a 2.5 foot long sword. I mean, it's kind of difficult to hide that, right? And so that kind of throws a big monkey wrench into the whole deal, is that sword, that normally swords have a purpose, that's why they're created, it really didn't actually exist. Because the samurais have a curved edge because it's used for cutting, right? And so you've got to think, they probably encountered many different design elements when coming up with that one. And so they started probably with the easiest one, which is a straight-bladed sword, right? Straight sword doesn't work as well as this curved sword. What do you think?
The straight-bladed sword comes from Korea. The Korean, the swords were brought over in the, I can't remember, the 900s, shortly before the Japanese society would pretty much import Chinese society wholesale. The Korean Empire, the Ri Empire, used straight-bladed swords, and you'll see this. And if the ninjutsu were still using, if the ninja were still using these swords, that would suggest they were importing them. Now, because the borders were closed, because the Japanese had walled off and become very xenophobic, that would suggest that you're dealing with a group that was ignoring the laws of the emperor and of the shogunate, which was a big damn deal. So, if they did have these straight-bladed weapons, the idea that they may have been made in Japan is quite unlikely. That means they would have been importing them from abroad. That's a no-no. So again, you're dealing with, if such a weapon existed, it would have been kind of illegal.
Interesting.
So
there's a whole lot of he said, she said kind of stuff within this whole ninjutsu argument thing. It still looks cool on screen, but we're just letting you know that there's not a whole lot of physical evidence to back this up. It's not like this martial arts that's been around for hundreds of years that's well documented. When ninjutsu first started, most of the guys were kind of illiterate. They weren't the top notch. Like samurais, they were a class of educated people, right? And so they all about writing and stuff, and they were about keeping their art form alive and their history alive and documenting all that stuff. Whereas if I'm an assassin, right, if I don't want people to know about me. I don't want written proof of me being an assassin.
Quick aside here. So I can hear the typing start in the comment section already. So let's say that you go to a school that calls itself ninjutsu. We are not suggesting you are not learning good stuff at that school.
Oh, yeah.
We are not suggesting that your school isn't derived from a martial art that's been around for 1,000 years. All we're saying is the historical evidence is lacking. And if your school has historical evidence, great, kick ass. I know some historians who would love to talk to you. That's all we're suggesting. And if your school calls itself ninjutsu and you're learning good stuff, bless you, keep on there.
That's also why I have him here. He remembers to do that kind of stuff. Saving me from all the comments.
So, let's get back to the Ninja Turtles.
Yes, so the straight-bladed sword, like I said, I can't find that anywhere. Your story about the Korean thing is very cool. And so I'm going to segue into another turtle. Okay, we're talking like Michelangelo with the nunchucks, all right? The ones that he uses are a very Okinawan type nunchuck with the shorter chain. And it's very cool. Like I said, You see it a lot in karate, and Taekwondo has adopted it later, and that's a type of flail. It was made popular in the U.S. By Bruce Lee, who was doing. He did nunchucks in a movie, and they weren't really the canonical like Okinawan nunchucks that we know. They had a longer chain, and that's actually a Filipino type of nunchuck called a. If I get the pronunciation right, it's a Tobak Toyak, I think. Like I said, I'm not really good at pronouncing my own language. Like just I know. Exactly.
Oh,
so
man.
yeah, exactly. So this is what happens when I teach classes. I don't talk that much. I can't pronounce what I'm saying.
Speaking of product placement, Tactical Kung Fu and MMA.
I don't even have the right shirt for it.
It's all right.
This is my fitness shirt.
There you go.
Anyways, so that is what was predominant in America. That's what they learned. It's like, hey, nunchuck stuff, we're going to do that. Now,
because it's fun.
It really is.
Nunchucks are fun.
It really is. And I mean, we teach it here, and not because it's the most practical weapon, but what it teaches. And the fact that you're learning it is super practical. And so I absolutely love them. And again, like you said, they're super fun. But anyway, so that is the Filipino version that was taught to Bruce Lee by Dan Inosanto. Bruce Lee kind of went on, learned a whole bunch of other stuff, came back to Inosanto, and was like, hey man, I got this stuff. And Inosanto started learning from him. And that's kind of where it all applies. But like traditionally, you would see that type of weapon in the Okinawan styles. How it began, I've heard different stories.
I've heard that it's supposed to be a grain thrasher.
Yeah, like
I've never collected grain. I've never done much farming, so I have no idea why you would use that. But sure, why not?
I've heard a couple things. I've heard a thing like they put it in the horse's mouth, and so and control the horse somehow. I don't know.
We're city boys.
Beach bum, beach bum,
dork, nerd, geek,
all the above, and so that's Michelangelo's weapon. The key thing here is that it is not a ninja weapon. They didn't have that. In fact, I think the years kind of don't add up. They don't align.
Couldn't tell you.
That's the problem. Now, Donatello's weapon, the bow staff, is in like every martial art you can think of. Man, there's a Chinese bow staff. There's Korean. Japanese, there's Okinawan. I think Japanese have entire art forms. It's called Bojutsu.
European, African, Mesoamerican, every single culture uses the damn staff.
If you got a big stick, they'll use it. And there's different ways to use it.
Little John with his fight against Robin Hood on the river, crossing the bridge.
Yeah, bow
every
staff.
Martial art has a bow staff.
Yeah,
or a quarterstaff, or whatever you want to call it.
Honestly, though, I will say the one I think that is in Ninja Turtles because it was on his shell in the back. I do think that was more of the Chinese short staff. I don't think, because it was also thin. It wasn't as thick as some of the more Okinawan and Korean bow staffs that I've seen. So.
Well, to piggyback on that point, one possible origin of the ninja clans, if we discount the idea that they were created by the Tengu on the mountaintop, the half human, half crow thing, is that the ninja clans may have originated with Chinese pirates who sailed in the Japanese Ocean. And so that lends credence to the idea that there may have been a Chinese staff. Now, that's a level of historical accuracy that you wouldn't expect from a movie with giant amphibians, but you never know.
Are they amphibians or reptiles?
Turtles are amphibians, tortoises are reptiles, I believe. Comment section, tell me if I'm wrong.
Economist, writer,
dork, or nerd.
I'm a geek.
There we go.
Yeah, and so that's a bow staff.
Yeah.
The techniques that they use, even though I think it's more of a Chinese short staff, is definitely the Japanese type techniques. I mean, that's all the same stuff for the most part. I mean, the human body can only move in so many different ways. You're going to have some of the same stuff.
Well, but it's also, he uses his hands mostly in the center, whereas the Chinese styles, they tend to move their hands off to one end and use it almost like a giant-ass sword.
Yeah.
So.
You realize they can't see your other hand.
I do.
Yeah, okay. Just Just putting that out there. So
This is this is what you get if you pay double. You know, if you get a code if you join here, and you get this side of the screen over here.
Yeah.
This is where we have the dancing cat.
And if you're just listening, okay, we're making a whole bunch of visual gags that you will never get. Okay.
We're really not. We're just shaking our hands in the air.
Moving my hands. That's what I'm good
If you've
at.
got the picture minimized while you're working, because come on, you're watching this at work, you're missing nothing.
Yeah, totally. And so, anyway, so that's 3 out of 4. Raphael's weapon is the size.
The best turtle.
Best turtle. I don't know. I'm partial to Michelangelo.
I know you are, and you're wrong.
I have to be like, it's my namesake.
I understand. You're still wrong.
And he likes pizza. And
I understand. They all like pizza. That's a low bar, man. You could scrape your ankle on that bar.
Yes, but I set my standards low so I can exceed them.
This is why we're friends.
Exactly.
Your low standards. So, Raphael.
Talk about the size.
The size of what? I couldn't resist.
The bad puns. Welcome to the Dragon Yawn, the show where we do bad puns all the time. No, we should have Olsen on here. He's the king of bad puns. I don't think I can get him on the show though. Anyways, Raphael's weapon. Okay.
The sai.
Those appear in a lot of different places. That is mostly a South Asian weapon. There's a lot of Indonesian martial arts that have that weapon. And it's an actual weapon. It wasn't like I was originally told it was a farming tool. I'm like, what can you do with farming wise? I mean, not from the beach, but still, it's kind of like, okay, cool, you can plant.
Well, you see, and the Japanese already had a weapon that was very similar called a jute, which is essentially it's like a short sword, a metal rod that's about the size of, say, your wakizashi, for those butcher knife, a Bowie knife, for those of you in the Western world, and it has a single arm that juts out, like a sai, if you're familiar with Raphael's weapons, but it's only on one side, not two. The idea that they would have a bifurcated version and the single side version was always quite weird. Learning that it's more of a Southern Asian weapon rather than a Japanese weapon definitely makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, from my research, it didn't actually really appear in Okinawa until about 1668. And if you also look at some of the other ones, the last official manual for ninjutsu that was written was 1664, I believe.
Something like that.
Something like that.
That was the Iga and the Koga clans and all that fun stuff.
And so the dates don't really line up.
Another thing we need to we need to interject here is, so you have 3 nations at play here during this history. You have Japan, you have Korea, and you have Okinawa in the middle. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Japanese history, Okinawa is kind of Puerto Rico to Japan's America, or maybe Ireland to England. It is a closely aligned nation. It is a nation that has been forever related to Japan, going back to antiquity, but for most of history actually wasn't technically part of Japan, or was still considered somewhat independent. And it's, for a long time, it was about equidistance between the Japanese Empire and the Korean Empire. And so if you had developments historically, things that might come to Okinawa would not appear in Japan for quite some time, or the other way around. So it's worth keeping in mind.
I'm actually checking my cheat sheet. I got my numbers backwards.
All
right, so the size did actually appear in Japan in 1668, whereas the oldest manual of ninjutsu was 1681. So there's a likelihood, a probability that was an actual ninja weapon. Again, it's long and they have to hide stuff, so the probabilities are very slim. But it did exist, so they can get that. But you see that a lot in like karate forms, because Okinawa, right?
To catch you in the corner.